Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on working with drawing tools. My name is Nick, and I'll be doing the presentation for you. As always, all of our presentations are muted, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type those in at any point during the presentation. And at the conclusion of the class, I'll go through and answer any of those questions that have come up. Also, at the conclusion of the class, I will also be sending out a PDF that will cover everything that we've touched on today. Again, today's class is on worksheet tools. And some of the topics that we're going to cover today are going to be adding in some bad insulation and some detailing, adding in some linear dimensions, and then adding in text to an elevation. So the first thing we're going to look at is the Modify Draw tools. So if you want to edit an inserted view, you can also add various types of information to your drawing, such as lines, shapes, hatching, detailing, text, and dimensions. To do this, you can select the Modify menu under your working drawing sheet, and this will give you a bunch of different controls that you can use to modify your existing plan. So you can delete, move, rotate, you can duplicate, basically creating a copy, you can array or offset, you can also stretch, scale, and mirror any line or anything that you have inserted in your sheet views, and you can break, extend, trim those lines as well. Under the Draw toolbar, in here you can use these tools to draw in lines, polylines, create arcs, circles, or ellipses. You can also create revision clouds to pass on for notes to show the client areas of revision. You can also add in your polygon and boundary hatch, and then this is also where you're going to be able to add in your details. And under the details, you can see that we're able to add in rigid insulation, bad insulation, wood sections, masonry sections, cut lines, your roof symbols, and new to version 14 is the member spacing notes. Under the Tools drop-down menu, here you'll be able to find a variety of text and dimension tools to help you annotate your plan further. So in here you can add in text using just a text dialog where you can type in the text that you want. We also have a text description, which will allow you to select an element from your worksheet view, and it will pull up the description or the name of that element. So for example, if you have a 2x4 brick veneer wall and you click on it, it will actually pull up a tag called 2x4 brick veneer wall. The same is true for leaders. You can add in text with the leader, or you can do a description with the leader, which will work the same as the text description. This will only add in a leader line for you. And then we have dimensions, and dimensions will allow you to add in a variety of different types of dimensions. You can add in your linear dimensions, align dimensions, angular dimensions, continuous, baseline, overall, and aligned, and you can also join or split a dimension that you've already inserted. One thing I want to note out, though, is to remember that the extra lines and hatch that you add are not linked back to your model. So any modifications you make here will not be reflected in your model or any subsequent views that you created. If you want to make changes other than line work changes, it is best to make them in your model view first and then update your smart views globally. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to add in my section, and I'm going to go into Define Smart View, and I'm going to add in a section view of this model. And I'm going to make sure that I have the framing information turned on. So I'm just going to go into my ceilings and make sure ceiling framing is turned on, that the structural floor framing is turned on, the roof framing is turned on, and that my wall framing is also turned on. So now I'll see all the framing in my model, and I'm just going to go in and insert this at 1/4 inch as a drawing and say insert. And then this will go through and create a section view of that model, and I can now see how that section is going to look in my view. So from here, I can actually zoom in on a section of wall and say I want to add in more detail. So if I just zoom in on a section here of our wall, I'm going to go up to Draw, Details, and I'm going to select the Bat Insulation option. And if you look down in the lower left-hand corner, it basically tells you what your next step is. So from here, it's saying, pick your first point of insertion. When inserting any of these details, it's always important to start at the bottom or the top. So start with your first click at the top or the bottom, and then move to the opposite direction. So you're going to go up or down depending on whatever one you selected, and then move across your drawing area. This will give you the width of your dimension, or sorry, the width of your bat insulation. So again, start at the top or the bottom, work your way up or down from there, and then move to the left or right to create the thickness of the bat insulation. I'm just going to left click to pick on that, and it adds it in. And you can do this multiple times. So you can go back into Tools, Draw, Details, and Bat Insulation, and you can create your bat insulation for this area. Again, working across my drawing area to create the bat insulation. Some of the other tools that we can use are also the masonry cut, or sorry, the wood cut lines. So if I go back to Draw, Details, and say Wood Section, here I'm able to specify where we're cutting through a piece of wood. And to do that, we represent that with an X. So again, it's just a matter of selecting the Wood Section tool, Draw, Details, Wood Section, and from here you can go top to bottom, left or right. This one does not matter. And then you basically just click on your points to add in your section for your wood. You can also add in masonry sections. So if I want to show where my brick is, I can specify what I want to show. If I want this to be brick, I can control my masonry height, my masonry width, my joint height, and my joint width. Here we can see all these values are being represented in the preview off to the right-hand side. So we can see what our mortar joint is going to be, the thickness of it, and the depth of it is 3/8 of an inch. The masonry width, so B value is 3 5/8, and the height is 4 inches. And then I say OK. And again, I want to start from the top and work my way down, and then move my mouse in the direction I want that to go, and it creates that brick section for me. So here I can see very quickly how that's going to look. And if I want to make adjustments to it, I can move this around so that it moves into the area that I want and make adjustments that way. Or I can just make sure when I add in my points, I'm specifying from the soffit line where I want that to go. If I wanted to add in a hatch to show the bat insulation in the ceiling, I don't really have a height specified here. So all I need to do here is just essentially add in where I want it to go. So again, moving my mouse from left to right. I'm going to go all the way across here. And then I just move my mouse up the height that I want and add in the hatch for the bat insulation in my attic. So again, those are some tools to go through to add in some detailing to your section views. Next, we're going to look at adding in linear dimensions. So to do that, we're going to go up to Tools, Dimensions, and we're going to select Linear Dimensions. And then in our drawing area, we're going to move our mouse over here, and we're going to select the top of our wall. We're going to move our mouse down to the bottom of our wall. And then we're going to move our mouse across, and we can see the height of that wall. This will give us the value from the top of our wall to the bottom of our wall. And we can actually go in and make adjustments to this if we want to clean up this dimension. So let's say we want this to actually just say 8'1". So here I would just go in and say, I want this to say 8 foot. One inch. And make sure you put the inch sign in. And then when you click out, you will actually see just the actual dimension that you typed in. You can also adjust the units of measure so that the precision is lower. So you're looking at 1/4 inch to 16 inch. Again, that's all going to be set up in your settings. Some of the other tools that you can use for your dimensions. So we have aligned and angular are going to work very similar to your linear dimensions. You're going to pick your points and specify where you want those lines to go. This continuous dimension will allow you to select a dimension, and now you can say from that dimension, I want to continue this up to my peak. So now you're going to see your new dimension. And if I delete out this, and let's just reset. Actually, let's just delete this out. And we'll use the original dimension so that it's actually specifying the correct height. And we're going to go into here, and then up to here. We'll go there. And then let's say we want to do continuous. I select that dimension, and now it's going to find that new dimension for me and add that in. We also have the split dimension, which will allow you to select a dimension and then split it wherever you want, and it will break that into two. So now we're looking at two dimensions that are 5'6". We can also join those dimensions. So if we want to join two dimensions together, we select the join dimension option, select your first dimension, and then the next dimension you want to actually join it to, and it will merge those two back together. While we're in this section view, we can also use one of our tools from our draw details. We can specify our roof symbol tool. And what this will allow us to do is specify the actual slope for our roof. So in here, I can say that I want this to be a percentage in 12, so we know it, or sorry, a number in 12. And then we're going to change our value here, and we're going to pick our roof. And we're saying that this is an 8 slope, so I can just modify this to say 8 exactly. And then I can say I want this to use a certain style, which is our dimension style. And I want the length to be, we'll say 2 feet, and we'll say alignment to the left, and then we'll say OK. And now I can drop in that roof slope tool to show the slope of that roof. And you can do this again around your entire model for all your different slope types. Next, we're going to look at adding text to an elevation. So let's quickly add in an elevation. So I'm going to go back to Insert. I'm going to select my Define Smartview, and I'm just going to quickly add in an elevation view of this design. And we're going to go from the, we'll go rear elevation, and then we're just going to say pattern mode, and then we'll say insert. So now attached to my cursor is that elevation view. And then from there, what I can do is I can use the text with leader, tools, leaders, and I can do a text with leader. And I can say this is going to be an asphalt shingle roof. And we'll say OK. And then I can pick from here. Now with ortho turned on, I will only be able to enter in lines at a 90-degree angle. So I can simply press F6 on my keyboard, and this will enable angle snap, which will allow me to snap to specified angles. And by default, in Envisioneer, your angle snap is set to 15 degrees. So that will allow you to snap from 0 to 15, 30, 45, and so on. So this will give me a good option for adding in my leader line at a 45-degree angle to specify that I want that to say asphalt shingle roof. Alternatively, I can use the tools, leaders, and I can select the description with leader option, select the wall, or select the window, specify my first point. And again, with my angle snap turned on, I can add in my leader line to show me that window. So here it's pulling up the 3'6" by 3' double casement window. And again, I can still go in and modify what this says. So if I select that text, I can go in and say, I want to adjust how that text is being displayed. So as you can see here, some of my text is in lowercase. I can make that adjustment here, or I can adjust it in the model view so that the text is all in capitals. And then when I do my description, it'll pull up that information. And again, from this elevation view, we can also insert our details for our roof symbol. So again, we can add in that roof symbol again to show what that slope is. And then the one thing I also wanted to touch on that we can do here is I go back to my floor plan, and I'm just going to add in a floor plan quick. I'm going to say define Smartview, and we'll use this. And I'm going to say I want to turn on my structural floor framing, but I'm going to turn off my cabinets and my interior furniture and my roof. We'll say OK. So now we can see our actual floor joists. And I forgot to turn off appliances. And OK. And then insert. So now attached to our cursor is our floor plan. What I can do now is new to Envisioneer 14, under details, I can add in a member spacing note. So this will tell me the span of my joists and which direction they're running. So if I just want to show an actual note, what I can do is specify my first point and my second point. So this is the direction that those joists are running. I'm going to use the standard dimension style. Right now it says none selected, but I can actually go in and actually select that, and it will say the joists are actually a 2x10 joist, and it's going to be at, and then we're going to say 16 inches OC for on center. And I already had cap box on. We'll say OK. So now what you're going to get is that designation marker for all your joists. So now you know that these joists are running in this direction, and this is the size and the spacing. So that is what the new tool, member spacing note, does in version 14. So that covers pretty much everything I wanted to talk about today for our working drawing tools. I'm just going to go over again quickly what we've covered today. So we went through and we added in our section view, and then from our section, we went in and added extra detail to it. So we went to draw, details, and we added in some bat insulation, some wood sections, masonry sections. We also talked about adding in our roof symbol and our member spacing notes. We also talked about adding in our dimensions and then using some of the dimension tools under our tools dimensions. We talked about our linear dimensions, using our continuous, and how to split and join our dimensions. We also added in an elevation view, which allowed us to demonstrate the text with leader option and the description text option. And then we also talked about adding in our floor plans and using that actual member spacing tool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to open up the question section. So again, if you have any questions pertaining to today's class, please go ahead and answer those now, and I'll do my best to answer those questions for you. One question we do get quite often is about hatching. So in some cases, it's probably, some people like to add the hatch in themselves. So what you can do there is you can actually add in your Smartview. You don't have to use the pattern mode option. You can add in your hatch manually using the boundary hatch or the polygon hatch. So I'm going to add in an elevation, and I'm just going to change this to be right or left so we can see the actual shingles, or our roof where our shingles would be. And then I'm just going to say inserts. And then attached to our cursor will be that elevation. And then from that elevation, I can go to tools, draw, and I can go to my boundary hatch or my polygon hatch, and I can add in my own hatch. So here I can say that I want this style to be, I want this to be my shingles. So I'm going to scroll down to roof shingles. I can also specify what I want to show. So here I'm going to say I do not want to include the boundary. I only want to see the actual pattern. I can control the scale and then detection. So this will actually go through, and if it finds like a dormer wall, it will cut around that dormer wall in this particular case. Right now we don't have anything to worry about because there's not going to be any kind of an interference or any kind of a boundary to go around. So it's just going to fill in that entire void. And then we're going to say select boundaries. And I'm going to move my mouse into that drawing area. And it's going to find, and you can see the green dotted line around that roof. I left click once and then say enter. And I can actually show a preview of what that will look like. And if I'm happy with it, I can press enter again to accept that position for the hatch. Again, if we do that one more time, boundary hatch, and this time let's add in, let's do a cultured stone, water stone look. Let's change that to limestone, and then we'll say boundary, and I want to add in that limestone hatch here. Enter, preview. We can see how that's going to look. If we're happy with it, we can press enter again. The hatch will always go in on the CAD layer, but in the properties, object properties on the right-hand side, we can control what this hatch layer can be, and we're just actually going to change this to be a hatch. So if we scroll down to other, I do believe we have a hatch in here, drafting hatch, and you can say OK, and it will change that to be the drafting hatch. Again, I'll leave the question section open for a little bit longer, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and enter those in. One question that's come in is, can you bring in framing? Yes, you can specify this to be just a framing plan if you want to as well. So when you actually go to do your insert and your define Smartview, let's say I just want to show the framing for the floor, what I would do is I would use my view filter to turn off everything, so display none. But I only want to see the actual structural floor framing. And when I say OK, all I'm going to see is the framing for that floor. And then I can say, I also want to get rid of that section line. So I'm going to go to my viewing aids and get rid of the section line and say OK. And I also want to get rid of the terrain. So elements on terrain, I'm going to turn that off too. So now I'm only seeing the floor framing. When I say insert, that is going to be the only thing that inserts into our view. Another question pertaining to that is, can you see that as an elevation for your wall framing? Yep, it would be the exact same, so that's not a problem. Again, define Smartview. You can do this through the section or the elevation view. Depending on the version you have, we also have a wall framing, wall panel tool. But if you want to show just the wall framing for this particular model, I would go in and say under View Filter, cancel Elevation View, and then let's actually look at the rear elevation, and then we can go in. Actually, you know what? If you do it this way, it's going to show you the framing behind that as well. So you're always going to see the framing of the wall behind. So to do just a wall panel, there's a tool under Tools, Wall Panels. And what this will do is it will allow you to insert just the panel of the wall that you want to see. So here we can see the different walls and how they're being framed. And we can see this. So if I bring in this wall here, which is the center wall right down the middle of our design, I can say, yes, I want to insert this on current worksheet, and I can actually place in this wall panel. And now we can see the elevation or the framing view of that one panel. And it will also give us a breakdown of what's being used to create that and the dimensions for it. If you only wanted to see just the framing of a wall in an elevation view, you could also try and do it this way. If I create a new section, you could do something like this. And from there, what you'll be able to do is on your sheet view. So basically, I'm just taking a section of just this portion of the wall. So I'm not going to see any of this extra framing back here. I'm only going to see the framing from here and from here up. And then what I can do is define my smart view. Instead of using the elevation, I'll use section 2. And I'm going to make sure that everything is turned off again, display none, except for my wall framing. And then I can say insert, and now I'm only seeing the wall framing for that wall. So that's another way of inserting your wall framing as well. One other thing I wanted to comment about as well is we always talk about when you're in your smart view, what you see is what you get in this view. So if I was to insert a section of just this area here, I would be able to create a detail. And then from that detail, I can add in all this extra information that we've added in here. And then you can create your own individual details for this particular drawing file. We also allow you to import details that have already been created. So these would be default details. So if you actually click on the import CAD file, and we have a details folder, in here there is a group of details that are basically just default details that you can add in and make adjustments to match more realistically to your design. And these are, again, just in DWG format. So if I select a roof rafter 2x4, say 2x6 brick veneer wall, and I say OK. Now in this import dialog, it's going to allow me to specify how this looks. And we know that this is a 1/2-inch scale, but we also know that we're working in a 1/4-inch sheet. So I need to double the size of this. So I'm just going to change the scale to be 2. And then insert. And now attached to my cursor is that DWG file. And I can go in here and I can see everything that it's calling out as a typical detail. But I can go in and make any kind of adjustments that I need to make this match my drawing. So I can go in and select this detail, and I can say on the right-hand side where it has my definition, I can say Edit Definition. And now inside that definition, I can adjust the individual lines for this detail to make adjustments to it to match my design. Once I'm done with it, I hit Escape on my keyboard, and that brings me out of the definition, and that change is now accepted. So again, I'll leave the question section open again for a couple of more minutes. So again, if you do have any questions, please let me know, and I'll do my best to answer those for you. The nice thing about this too is if you actually create a detail that you like and it's going to be more typical to what you design, you can actually save that portion of the detail, create a copy of it, bring it over to a new sheet. So I can take this and let's go in and just take a copy of this. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to say edit, copy. I'm going to go to a new sheet. I'm going to say edit, paste. I'm going to paste that in there. I'm going to delete the title block out. I'm going to delete out these dimensions. I don't want those for this, like so. But I am going to take this Smartview and I'm actually going to explode it. And this is probably the only time I would ever recommend exploding a Smartview, mainly because it loses its linkage back to your model. So if you make a change to the model, you won't be able to update an exploded Smartview. But in this particular case, we're creating a section, or sorry, a detail from a section view. So I don't really need this to be linked anymore because I'm creating a DWG file. So I'm just going to explode. It's going to warn you, yes, dimensioning that or exploding this will adjust. That's fine. We're going to say OK. And now everything is individual lines. And I can go through and delete out lines, make adjustments to it. Essentially what I want to do is I just want to create a line straight through here. And I'm going to say from this line back, I want to trim and get rid of everything else. So with that line selected, I'm going to go to modify and I'm going to select the trim option. And now I can go through and actually trim off all of these lines on the other side of this line. And what it's going to allow me to do from here is actually create a detail of just this portion of the model so that I can save it as a DWG file to use for future use in other files. And from here, what I would do is I would just stretch this back like so. And now, again, trim. I forgot the terrain lines. Like so. So with everything gone that I need, I can now just delete out the rest. And get rid of that line, like so. And now what I can do is I can actually take this and I can say, well, I want this to be a new detail that I'm going to use going forward. So I can just go File, Export, 2D Drawing. And it's going to open it up in the Details folder, which is perfect because that's where I want it to go because it'll always be available to me when I just go to select, insert a new DWG file. And I'm just going to call this Webinar Detail. And I'll say Save. So it's now created that detail. And now let's say I want to actually insert that in here. All I would do is go to my, Insert Details. And then from my details, I'll scroll down to Webinar Detail. And I can now insert this multiple times in any new drawing that I create. So every time I start a new drawing that has a similar type of construction, I can use that as a detail. That seems to be all the questions for today's class. Again, I will be sending out a PDF that covers everything we talked about today. If you do have any questions after the class, you can contact our support department and they'll be able to help you out with any questions you may have as well. But I want to thank everybody for joining today, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you very much.